Hey guys, so this week I'm planning to talk about how you can make a virus such that it bypasses antiviruses, ITSs, all of that. Now, I'm not going to talk about Metasploit, more about how you would make one from like, think of it, this is your base. This is base, on this basis, antiviruses catch a virus. And one more thing, this is again all for educational purposes, blah blah blah. You know the stuff, right? Don't use this for anything which you're not supposed to use it. And if you do, make sure you have permissions. So, okay, now coming to how would you make a virus? Now, I am not going to talk about how do you make a mass virus, basically a virus that will target everyone. This is a very specific one, focused on on maybe a very specific target person in mind. Okay, and this is something you need to do your research on. But my point is of not focusing less about how to make it, more about how do you not get caught, or how does a antivirus catch you or catch a particular virus. And this is for the very step one, stage one kind of a virus. You will not be able to defeat an analyst, specifically if specifically the analyst is really smart. Okay, this is for if he's, I mean, it's mainly focused for defeating the computer level security um, layers in place. So understand how an antivirus works. Okay, or before that, there are two things you need to know. It's not technical. I mean, the second one is kind of technical, but first one is how long can you wait for your, in the how long can you be in a system. And now this is assuming you have already compromised the system. Okay, this is not the way to compromise it. The way to compromise is I'll talk about in future videos and podcasts, but this is about when you compromise it, what you want to achieve, specifically from the spreading part, maybe to show an illusion or show convince management about it. You create a virus and goes and maybe creates file on the desktop. Now understand this, viruses are specifically, it's not something insanely difficult to do. Okay, and it's not something that is out of the world, or that only elite hackers can do. It's pretty easy, and I'm not talking about using Metasploit. I mean, there are problems with that, but yeah. So firstly, how long can you wait to be in the system? The second thing is, who's your target. Know your target. Know who you're targeting. Know the company you're targeting. Know the person you're targeting. Know the thing you're targeting. The thing could be a server, could be an IoT device, whatever it is. Understand it. And I mean, I'm gonna criticize on all the people who are like, who say they're hackers and just know how to run Metasploit and nothing more than that. Is that you cannot make a virus that will run long term. I mean, it's not only meant to run long term. It's more about, you will not know how to deal with a situation when you are faced with a particular problem. Now, an IoT device, say, many people think IoT devices only run Linux. No, IoT devices also run certain versions of Windows. It's called Windows IoT. Okay, and it is a very stripped down version of Windows. And yeah, and there are reasons why Windows has to be installed and not Linux. You can argue Linux versus Windows another day, and I really don't want to get into that argument. But uh, understand why it is Windows. Now, I'll tell you of something that has happened, or more like, this is a real story. So, this is one person, Jack. Just call him Jack. Okay, he has his house fully automated. Now, for that house to be automated, finally it runs on a server. He basically has a server running all the automation. Okay, now the way that server is, it basically uses Azure services, basically for getting all the updates, for getting all the patches, all of that. It works based on Azure. You can run it entirely based on Linux, but the thing is that the infrastructure is already in place by Microsoft for all of this, for running patches, for seeing loopholes in the code, all of that. So they're using Microsoft infrastructure. Now by default, if you are running Azure, it would make more sense to run the entire thing on Windows. Why Windows? Is because if something goes wrong, you can call up Microsoft and ask them for a solution to the problem. Whereas with Linux, what's going to happen is you'll need to see on the Linux community, all of that, and businesses don't prefer that. In the sense, what is a community? It's just a group of people coming together. There could be really smart people, it could be really dumb people, but yeah, now we can talk another day also on how the Stack Overflow works and all, based on the most popular answer, the most accurate answer. But that's a discussion for another day. But yeah, if a company has a problem, they can't wait 1 day, 2 days, 3 days to get an answer. They need an answer instantly. Okay. Now some may say go for Red Hat Linux and all. Yeah, okay, that's another thing. But Red Hat does not have the infrastructure in place that Microsoft has. And that at the end comes to why they're running Windows. Now when they run this particular version of Windows, you need to also know what can you run on that. There are limitations. I mean, if you have used it, I have not used it to a great degree, but I've used it to a certain degree that I know how irritating it is to use it. It's annoying, but at the same time I also know what I can run on that and what I cannot run on that. So understand your target. That could be place, thing, person, organization. Okay. Next, what capabilities do they have? Now when you run Windows, okay, let's say you have a Windows system and you're running Windows Defender. Windows Defender is good to a certain degree. I mean, they have made progress. It's not like, it's not something that I would run on a system that is really critical. But yeah, I would, if if it's better than having no antivirus. And I would say, like, so on one of my systems, you cannot run McAfee or you cannot run Malwarebytes that easily as other people think. You will get stopped. I mean, it's a very funny thing to do, but an attacking system, it's better to have an attacking system and a normal system, where on the attacking system you just do attacks, nothing else. You have Kali, you have Windows, whatever, but there's no antivirus, because these antiviruses stop you from doing things. So on that kind of system, I would say Windows Defender works. I mean, you need to stop certain functionality, else it becomes a pain to deal with. But yeah, so now because I understand this is the kind of system that this is the kind of system that it is. I know what I can do, what I cannot do. Now, there are cons of running Windows Defender on my system, which is the attacking system. Okay, and I cannot use it to my full ability. So that is, so you're talking about right now running Windows Defender where you cannot use it to your full ability. That means security is comparatively less. I do run certain security procedures basically every week. I run a security scan, I check for malware, all of that I do. And then I manually go through all the files that get flagged. So I know what is on my system, what is not on my system, that way. So coming back to this, understand your system. Now coming to the antivirus, how it works. An antivirus works based on file signature. Now this is one of the things. There are many more parameters, and then it gets into a full mesh of all possible things that happen for a particular virus, and they create a signature. So they see all the things that the virus is doing and then create a signature for it. So now what does it do? First, it sees file signature. That's like the most basic antivirus thing that it goes through. So any known viruses out there, or it'll catch it. So anything that is old will not work. That is the same reason why your default Metasploit won't work, because so many people have ran it till now that it catches it within an instant. So you need to run multiple encoding processes on it. Now, I'm not going to talk about Metasploit, it's more about the procedure and the mindset while creating your virus. So, this is it. So, as soon as you create your own virus very specific to an organization from scratch, then it doesn't come in your signature. Now, the key is from scratch, and that it does take a lot of work to do and create it from scratch. So that's the reason why you don't see me going and making viruses every now and then. It's a lot of work. If I do it, it's for a very specific reason, to test out a very specific functionality. Okay. Now, the second thing is patterns. What files is it accessing? So there was this one incident, I think it was a pretty big incident which affected the entire world. I forgot which one. But um it it was it this guy who found the solution to this antivirus, basically defeating it, was it had the virus would go and check for a particular file on the system. So the creators of the virus basically said to go and check for a particular file on the system. If it had it, don't infect that system with the virus. Why? Because either the virus has already infected the system, or secondly, it was their own system which they had to run Windows. So they didn't want it to affect their own systems. So that's how this one guy figured that if a particular file was there in a particular location, then it would not be the virus wouldn't affect the system. Now this is assuming that the virus hasn't affected the system till date. If it has already affected the system, then I mean, you're screwed. You're already infected. So now let's take this same thing and modify it, or make it better. So if I'm not wrong, it was just a normal file, like a blank file, particular file name. Now what could the attacker have done to improve on this? If they had checked the hash value of the file, and that hash value and the file by itself wouldn't be an empty file, it would be something would be written in that file. Now, the infrastructure and the way the logic would work would change, because every file would have to be unique in a certain way, which makes it a little harder to do. But yeah, so only if a particular file existed and if the hash value of that file was equal to what was there in the code, then it wouldn't have infect the system. Then the next thing researchers see, specifically forensic sees in a particular virus, is what DLLs is it used. Okay, let's go with used first. So which all DLLs does it use? So certain DLLs, like certain ransomwares, use certain DLLs to get low level system access or hardware access for encryption of data. That way it cannot be, it cannot be reversed. So what these antivirus or what these analysts did, they made sure, if first of all there were certain signatures. I don't remember when it changes from virus to virus, ransomware to ransomware, but they'll check if the virus or the ransomware is of a certain hash, if it has a fixed hash value. Now that's polygraphic ransomware, wherein the ransomware code or the executable remains the same. So by a simple signature, it goes. Secondly, they also have other checks for certain DLLs. Now, non-polygraphic ransomwares or viruses where the code keeps changing. Alright, I must have got that wrong, but one of them is where the code keeps changing. So where in this particular model won't work, wherein it goes and checks the file hash, because each file is a new hash, each code is different. Now there are ways to do it, but yeah, sometimes it's as simple as having a random value that keeps changing every time, so your whole file value changes. But again, there are ways to again catch that, so it bypasses the system of specifically checking the hash of the file. Next comes to what DLLs does it install. Now, if a ransomware, if a virus installs a certain DLL and it also has access or it does certain patterns or behavior patterns, it again goes and blocks it. And now these patterns, it's called, I think, RR rules. RR rules, if I'm not wrong. It's been a while since I've gone through all this, but yeah. So these are rule sets that it's like a rule set that they create for each type of virus, each variant of virus, all the DLLs, its behaviors, its file patterns, its IPs, its host names it connects to. And I'm going to talk about below host names and also how you can bypass it. But yeah, so an antivirus would go and get these rule sets and check all the signatures. Okay, now when I say signature, it does not mean file signature specifically, the hash of the file. There are other kinds of signatures, which is what I talked about. Basically, patterns, DLLs used, DLLs installed, all of that. Next comes to IPs and host names it connects to. Now, you cannot, I mean, the most easiest way to block a virus, like if it has to get commands, is block the C2 server. What virus creators have done is they basically go and have multiple domains. Okay, and yeah, they'll have multiple domains, and it just checks all the domains for the command and control server. Now it becomes hard to do it, like blocking based on domains, all of that. So they'll encrypt the data, all of that. But this is one way what viruses currently do. They'll have multiple subdomains or domains specifically, and multiple IPs to connect to multiple servers all around the world. Most of the time, it is domain name so that they can point to any particular server they want. Now, the problem is with IP specifically, sometimes what happens is the IP was used for conducting attacks earlier, and then now it's used for a legit purpose. So that's wherein defenders need to, see what is the purpose, all of that. So that's where an analysts come into the picture. But yeah, so host names are the way to go. Now I'll talk about how do you defend yourself also in the future, in future episodes, but this is specifically on how to attack. Now, what is the solution around this? One is having multiple domains. The second is having a P2P network, or more like multiple P2P networks. So that way, so I don't remember which virus this was, but what it did not get the C commands from one specific server. Whichever it place it would infect, it would, that particular server would become a node for getting commands. And what would happen once the commands are in the P2P network, it would spread like a maniac. So it wouldn't matter. So what analysts kept doing was they thought this was the server that was compromised, or this was the C2 server, they would block that IP. Then another server would get compromised. This they would think this was the server that is a C2 server, they would block the IP. And eventually they realized it was a P2P network. So basically they were screwed from that point of view. They had to run other mechanisms of stopping the virus. Now, the reason I'm saying this and I'm talking about this is specifically to understand how viruses are made so that you can know how to defend it. So, yeah, another way was, or that is basically to change your file format. Now, there can be nothing bad for a TXT file or text file, right? So what would I do if I was a malicious person? I'd go put all the malicious code in a TXT file or text file. Now I'll have another code which basically goes and executes commands or executes stuff. It's say like Python. So what I'll do, I'll put Python into an exe file, or there are ways to do that. Okay. And I'll tell Python to go and execute the data in the txt file. Now, for an antivirus, Python is known. It knows that it is not malicious in nature. And the second thing, txt files are not executable. So it won't execute. So that means it's not a problem, right? According to antivirus. And that's when we can bypass it. So now coming to the mindset and the thinking pattern that goes into creating these antiviruses. Antiviruses by itself are kind of very dumb. It is at the end humans who can catch it all, like people can see the big picture and then think antiviruses, or yeah, antiviruses are specifically just following rules. If it doesn't follow any particular rule, it's not a virus. Now you have all, I mean, I'm pretty sure if you're a vendor, or any vendors listening to this podcast or video, they'll start screaming, oh, we got AI and all of that. Even AI at the end, are a combination of rules or rule sets. It keeps adapting. That's what every antivirus does. But yeah, it's still following rules. And that's the same problem which even defenders face. They can Attackers can take a existing virus, modify it, and with the same code base. I mean, it becomes a little hard, but yeah, you can modify it and it can work again. Now, again, there are ways to stop it, and if they modify it a lot, it can be a completely new variant or what. But certain parts of the code can be the same, and it's not like you can say like, oh, you should, um, block that particular code. That code could be so common as to like a print statement or anything which is, I mean, your base code is the same, and those base codes are there in many other exe files. So that will go and flag all the other exe files which are used for intentional purposes. So it becomes hard to do it. But my point was, it's not that you take a you take a virus and then it gets caught and can never be used again. You modify it a little bit, you'll get through. Now, coming to another new attack vector which malicious actors used. So Windows has something called WSL Windows no W WSL Windows Subsystem for Linux. So by default, when you think about it, Linux viruses won't run on Windows, right? I mean, it doesn't matter. Or even if you have any Linux commands, it doesn't technically run on Windows. It's only that because Microsoft has got something called Windows Subsystem for Linux where you can run Linux commands. Attackers started putting malicious code in Linux commands, basically bash, okay, which would typically not run on Windows and run it in WSL. So what would happen is the antivirus wouldn't catch it. Again, antivirus is a dumb piece of code following rules, and that's the same thing for viruses also. But yeah, um, I mean, anything for that matter, any code is a dumb piece of code that follows rules. All the people who like AI and all, yeah, can start shouting at me, but again, AI also follows rules. It creates the rules, whatever. It's pieces of code at the end of the day. It is following what is there in the code. So again, another new attack vector. And the truth is, whatever you do, the attacks are just going to keep increasing or getting better because people want new features. And I'm not cribbing about it. This is the reality. People want more features. With more features, you get more problems. Now, I do not know how DevSecOps is going to continue and get better over time. But what happens with DevSecOps, it mostly focuses on the code. Sometimes there's a business logic problem where your code is working fine and your business logic is a problem in how your code is supposed to work as a whole. So again, that could be exploited and used. So there are multiple attack vectors, and this is just going to keep increasing. These are just a few methods I spoke about right now, and yeah, that's it. So it's not something that is going to. It's not something that it seems it's going to go down anytime soon. It's just going to increase, and every new vendor that comes up is going to say, yeah, we were able to stop this particular virus and all. Of course, eventually every vendor is going to stop every virus because they're going to get the rule sets and all of that. So don't really also go on to this trap that vendors will protect you always. Eventually, I'm pretty sure, give me any vendor, give me some time with the software, and I mean, I'm pretty sure not only anyone who knows what they're doing will be able to break into it. I mean, give it time and no updates, all of that. Practically, very rarely do I see organizations actually updating the software. So eventually, after even let's say 5 or 10 years, I'm pretty sure the security vulnerability is going to come up, and I will be able to exploit it, and anyone will be able to exploit it. So that's it. Happy exploitation.